there used to be a saying that it's okay to talk to yourself. This was many years ago, as long as you don't answer. And I would think, well, then who's listening? Yeah, except it gets a little, what do I want to say, odd, because often I'm at a grocery store and people, I kind of move away when they hear me discuss, do I need this? Should I get this? Should I get the bigger can? Or, so.
No, I know I'm in good company. I do that too.
Do you? I find myself.
I always find myself saying, "What was that, Mama?" And she's like, "Oh, nothing. Just talking to myself."
Yeah, it's when around other people, and then you combine that with what I look like, and it's like people just kind of, when I explain it to them, I'm talking having a conversation with them, then you see them carefully back away, make some distance. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Louis B. Free Radio Show, Brain Food from the Heartland. And I've got Dr. Stephen Gage's family with me. Oops, sorry. Of course, this morning. And I'm honored to have you. Stephanie, good morning to you.
Good morning. It's so good to be here.
I'm honored to have you. I'm honored to have you. Want to introduce the kids?
Sure.
Again, for listeners, I'm sorry. For listeners, there will be a YouTube video up. It's Facebook Live plus a YouTube video up shortly after the show. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. This is my daughter Claudia,
Hey, Claudia.
And my son Brendan.
Brendan, no, right?
A couple times, I think.
Let's talk a little bit. Again, there's going to be a memorial concert for Dr. Gage, for your dad and your husband, Stephanie, coming up. We're going to talk more about that. Of course, I've got it posted at louisfreeshow.com, louisbfree.com, wfmj.com. I don't know. Those places, all those places. Let's talk a little bit, Stephanie, about, tell us your love story. Oh, I'm sorry, I asked you a question and now I'm going to interrupt. I have to tell you, I want to make sure I tell you. Stephen Gage had been on the show a number of times and we got friendly, very friendly. And he always talked so beautifully, always spoke so beautifully about you. And what's interesting is that tells me what a real man is, because so often I think there are guys that think that when they're with other guys that it makes them, they'll say something, they'll complain about their girlfriend or their wife. She's and even guys that I knew that seemed to adore the lady in their life, felt when they were around the guys that somehow made them, I don't know, macho, cool, whatever. I find it disgusting. And that was one of the things I absolutely love about Stephen. He, on air and off air, by the way.
Yeah.
Always. Yeah. So your love story. I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
Oh, no, that's okay. We met at the University of Illinois in the fall of, 1989. It was the fall of 1989. And he was there getting his doctorate. I had started my master's degree, and the program at that time had swing classes, if you will. Doctoral students and master's students were in the same classes. And in one of the courses, the professor assigned us to the same group project. And it was Steve and myself and two other ladies. And by the end of the project, I got the prize.
I love that.
Yeah, we started dating, and
Can you tell the IHOP story?
Yeah, our first date was at an IHOP. Graduate student budgets, and
sure.
That's what it was. We spent a lot of our dates over macaroni and cheese in the dorm room, or peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Great.
Yeah. But
She's leaving out the best part of the IHOP story,
Okay.
which is that
Do
when
tell.
when he was trying to work up the courage to call her and ask her on that date, right? He called a good like 5 to 10 times in a row, and the way I've heard the story is she'd pick up and he would freeze and then hang up, and then he'd call again. She'd pick up, freeze, hang up, and eventually on there, it finally was able to say, "Will you go to IHOP with
Yeah.
me?"
Yeah, it was,
I love that. Will you go to hop with me? It's beautiful, though. It's a beautiful story. And started falling in love with him.
oh yeah, well, he was for my first memory of him is in a class with Dr. Zimmerman. She was one of the music education professors there, and he came in harried, carrying a cup of coffee, spilled coffee all down the front. He was wearing light blue and white, and he was just a disaster. And I'm like, how endearing. What does that say about me? That I was like, oh, I'm attracted to that. So
That's great.
but that's who he was. He epitomized the absent-minded professor, always, coming in distracted. And yeah, so one of my very first memories of him was in that class, spilled coffee.
And the proposal, do you mind if there's something you don't want to, at what point, what was with respect to Malcolm Gladwell that wrote the tipping point for you, or for you, what was it? You knew he was the guy.
It was, I don't know that there was any one thing. It was just, we became really, really good friends, and
beautiful.
And I liked being with him, and I felt that, there was understanding, and it just kind of developed. And it's interesting because we started in this class together. We started in this group project, and we spent a lot of time together, but in the company of other people, and it just I'd say it started, blossom started out of friendship. And so and as far as the actual proposal goes, it wasn't like kids do it now, where there's like a big production, and like, no, he didn't hire the U of I marching band to come serenade me or anything like that. It was more of we just talked about it, like, let's do this. So kind of low key.
Married how many years?
Married in 91.
So
over 30 years.
I'll do the math.
32 years. 32 years.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Will you share a certain memory? If you come back to you on that.
I was gonna say that's hard.
30
well,
some.
okay. All right. When we were first, I will never forget this. We it was spring break of our year together at University of Illinois, and we had decided that I needed to meet his mother and stepfather, who were living in near Hershey, Pennsylvania. Newmanstown, Pennsylvania is where they were living. And so we were driving, of course, can't afford plane tickets, so we were driving, and peanut M&Ms were our constant companion. We both loved peanut M&Ms, and we munched our way across the states of Indiana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, eating peanut M&Ms. And after visiting his mom and meeting her, and she was ill at the time. She had pancreatic cancer, and she wasn't very healthy, and we told her we were getting married, and we had it was a wonderful first meeting. And we left there and we went to Niagara Falls, and I'll never forget my sister saying, "Don't do anything stupid. Don't go to Niagara Falls and get married." So,
So you went to Niagara Falls and got married?
well, no, we went to Niagara Falls, had a lovely visit, came home and planned the wedding. So, and then we got married.
It's worth noting, this is the sister who
Got married in Vegas last November.
Yeah, I was gonna say there is a sister that would get married in Niagara Falls, and it's not this one.
Oh God, that's great. That's great. Now I'm going to be, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, well, I was just gonna say, came home, planned the wedding, and, we were married in August of 91. And unfortunately, Carol did not make it to see us married. She passed away in the spring. So, that was kind of heartbreaking, but we did have a good visit with her. I did get to meet her. I did get to know her a little bit. Yeah. So,
I'm grateful for that time. Now, I've never claimed to be professional at what I do. I neglected to take a picture of you all from the screen. So just bear with me a couple of seconds here, and let me grab a couple of these. Okay, thanks. All right. How about that? I don't think anybody on radio or does things like that in the middle. Picture from a screen. Whew. Okay, so how about Claudia? Will you tell us about your dad?
Yeah. My dad was just a very loving person. He just had such a warmth and invitingness about him. One of those people that never met a stranger. I have memories of being little, and we would go to Barnes and Noble. We had these we called them daddy days, and he would take me. We would go to the park and the Barnes and Noble and the Dunkin' Donuts, and they were these just absolutely lovely days. And I really, really treasure those memories. But it feels like always, we would be in line at Barnes and Noble ready to check out the books, and inevitably there would be a student or a colleague in line, and we'd stand in line and we would chat. But that's just who he was, so friendly. So
you got to plan 30 extra minutes at the end of your trip to try and actually get out of wherever you were visiting.
Yeah. But always willing to talk, always willing to help and support and let an ear, do what he can.
And it was always genuine,
Yeah.
because you could feel his heart. You could feel that, and that openness.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those treasured memories, I've got to say, and I say this often to young parents, you will be blown away by what your child or your kids are going to remember. It's wonderful. Decades later, they'll remember something and remind you of something that was really wonderful for them, that you just figured, I'm just being with you, whatever it might be. And those treasured memories. And I really appreciate you sharing. By the way, thank you for saying when you were little instead of when you were young. That's a bit insulting to old people. Oh, when I was young, it's like, really? Again, I know it's all relative. So, any other? Do you have something else you want to share?
No.
Well, let's go to. How about you, young man?
Well,
about Dad.
There's a lot. There's a couple of things. There's anytime we were driving through Boardman, I would always absolutely beg my parents to let me go into Toys R Us if we were driving. I would say, turn right, thinking that I was gonna. There was one time he did. I actually managed to convince him to go in there and buy a toy for me when he wasn't supposed to. I asked my mother about this very recently. I said, did I think that I persuaded him, but it was actually like, this time it's fine. And she said, no, that one was not in the budget. But I really, like Claudia was saying, he was so so warm and so loving. I mean, he cared about all of his students so much. He was everybody's dad at Youngstown. And being there as a music major, playing in his ensembles, you know, there were moments where that was a really cool thing, and there were moments where it was a little bit, where it could be frustrating at times, you know, like I don't want to share my dad. He's my dad, you know. So every
Yeah, I'll bet. Yeah.
on I'm trying to think here. I think it was Mondays and Tuesdays. Mondays, you know, I would have classes until 4 or 5 p.m. and then we would have the youth symphony at 6 o'clock. I would be coaching the horns. He would be, of course, running the group. We would drive over to Powers Auditorium from campus. We'd get subway on our way to downtown. We'd sit and eat that together. And Tuesdays, between the end of my classes and the beginning of Dana Symphony, like at YSU, we would order Jimmy John's delivered, and we'd sit in his office and we'd just eat our sandwiches for an hour. And there'd be moments where we'd both just be sitting there kind of eating, not saying anything, because like it's crazy out there, you know, all day you feel like you're constantly interacting and helping people. And so those were, rarely was his office door locked. But those hours, you know, where we would just sit and eat dinner before orchestra rehearsal, he would lock his door for me so I could just have my dad myself for a little bit.
That's wonderful. I learned that a lot from students. It's wonderful. From when he would do the gig with me, I would hear from students or get emails or whatever comments, and everybody adored him. And I'll never forget him being in studio with me, and he said, "It's not work for me. I don't work. I've never worked a day in my life." I think it was the first time he said it to me. "I've never worked a day in my life."
He always said, if he could have a tunnel that went in between the walls and the floors from his office to the band room,
Yeah.
right? Because you know, those were the two places he kind of felt that like everything else in that job, you know, that was the work, so that the real part of it, you know, was just what he loved to do, you know, be in front of the kids, be with the students.
And to have, again, it's great to have a professor, teacher, instructor that knows what they're doing, that can impart that knowledge, that education to you. Yet with Stephen Gage, his heart was there. And that is perfect. When you have, and he truly, I know you all know this, truly cared about the students. He would talk about students, and I would hear that from students and the impact that he would make with students, and that will go on through those students. Sorry, not for me to get emotional. I'll never forget him saying, he would say, "Louis, my brother from another mother." And it was because we could relate on so many things, and it was just his warmth. It was just so wonderful. Let's talk a little bit about the concert.
Okay.
Save me from myself, and so I stop talking.
Do you want to start, or it's on Sunday, May 21st at Stambaugh Auditorium. Concert begins at 3:30. We've assembled between 55 and 60 former students as a wind ensemble, and we have some of his colleagues and former students from New York coming.
Wonderful.
That will be playing. They're in a jazz ensemble that will be performing a piece that he wrote for his oldest son, Matthew, called Blues for Shorty. So his New York years will be represented. We have a video coming from Indiana State University, where he finished his career last semester. We have Catherine Empel will be performing a solo flute piece that Steve wrote for Claudia. And then we also have some members of Phi Mu
Alpha Sinfonia, the music fraternity.
They will be every fall during Sweetest Day and every February for Valentine's Day. They would have a fundraiser where they would sing a love song to whomever, you know, for a donation. And Steve always had them sing to me. And finally, one year I got a surprise on him and had them do an arrangement of "You're Still the One" by the rock group Orleans. And I
know the song. Yeah.
They did an arrangement of that, and that will be performed on the concert as well. We're finishing by inviting anybody in the audience who wishes to bring their instrument and join us in the performance of Stars and Stripes Forever. And then
everybody in the audience, me excluded. Nobody wants.
Well, bring your kazoo and you can play too.
You know? Okay. Careful. Don't put it in my head.
And then following the concert, we're going to have a cookie reception for all those in attendance. So it should be a wonderful, wonderful afternoon of music. And Brendan can tell you more about the other music that we've selected for the program. And if you want to talk about some of our
please
ensemble members. Oh, and the conductors. The conductors we have coming are all students that studied conducting with Steve, and they are all now teaching in colleges throughout the United States.
Amazing.
Yeah. So
wonderful. Wonderful. Brendan, tell us.
Yeah, so that main part of the event, which is the kind of alumni wind ensemble, there's people from all of his 28 years teaching at Youngstown State. We've got you know, some players that were there in the 90s, and we've got some players that were there with me. I will be playing.
Hey,
I reserved the spot for myself, I will admit. But I'd like to think that he would have put me in there if he was picking the group too. But it's a group of people. You know, he always talked about wanting to do an all-star alumni band, because he has so many kids who went through YSU that are in groups like, you know, the DC military bands, you know, like the US Air Force band in Washington DC, and we've got a lot of those military players. In fact, a lot of them were very fortunate there. Were able to get approval from their commanding forces and take some time off to come be with us. You know, we've got people that are teaching their instruments at universities, you know, like they're the applied faculty on their instrument. We've got some people that are band directors that still do a lot of performing. We've got some people that are just out there doing whatever performing they can and doing really well with that. Yeah, it's a really great group. You know, we were able to build an ensemble very, very much like the same type of makeup, the same size, number of players that he liked in the wind ensemble. And then the music, we picked pieces that he performed a lot over his career. So one such example would be Holst's First Suite for band. That's kind of considered like the concert band piece of music. Like every band director, every player that's going to be in a wind band needs to know that. And so that's a piece that he performed with the group like once every 4 years. You know, he made sure that every student that came through YSU was exposed, and, you know, to not just to this piece, but that there were pieces he felt were really important, and he made sure that every single one of his students was exposed to these kind of pillars of the repertoire. And that's my high school band director was a YSU alum, somebody who did an undergrad and a master's degree with my dad. And what I didn't really realize, it wasn't anything he had to like tell me. Something I realized after getting out of high school, seeing other high school bands perform, is the way he instilled in his students the importance of playing good music. Sometimes the really valuable, good pieces of the repertoire can be a little challenging, and sometimes band directors be like, oh, my band's not quite there. If you don't give the kids something to reach towards, they're never going to get there.
Yeah.
You know,
Beautiful.
you don't want to like give them something impossible. You wouldn't make you wouldn't make an 8-year-old play like
What?
Shostakovich 5, right? But you know, like that's
It's the dare to be great.
yeah, dare to be great. That was one of the things he always said, you know, and you have to give students an opportunity to reach for that if they're ever going to end up getting to it. So we've got a lot of good music on the program. Holst, October by Eric Whitaker. That's a fun one. That's the one that the Wind Ensemble's recording of that has 1 million listens on Spotify.
Oh,
That's from the CD they put out in 2006.
Sounds right.
2006 or 7, I think. There's some Percy Granger, and there's a couple pieces on there that were ones that he specifically requested. He always kind of said like, this is the music I want played at my funeral someday. And I was like, all right, Dad, like it's a little morbid, but
well, I hear you when I speak with people close to me about say vital, you know, this or that. They'll say you need to express that to people. You need to tell people because So I'm sure it was hard to hear when he said that, yet may not have known had he not expressed that to you.
There
By
have
the
been
way, I'm sorry, there's actually an album by, can't believe I'm going to remember this, Snake Farm called Songs for My Funeral. When you said, it's there's some morbid stuff on there, but it's just made me pick it up. I'm sorry.
there have been numerous times in the process of planning this, we turn and look at each other and we're like, shoot, I'd like to just ask him, you know, and because while we in a roundabout way had kind of talked about things like this, you know, we didn't pay attention because it may have been 5 years ago, you know, and it's like, well, that's a long way off. And
there was I have a distinct memory of talking to him like, if you were to put this alumni group together, what specific list, like all the way down the line of players would you ask? And he probably gave me every name and I was just like, cool. And then didn't write it down or anything. So we've kind of had to like, you know, assemble, and we're trying to do our best by him.
It has been,
You certainly are.
It has been very difficult though, because there are so many outstanding alumni out there, and
we could have a band 5 times the size.
It is heart-wrenching knowing there are people that want to play and there's just not room on the stage. It has been very hard for us knowing that not everybody can be on stage with us. That's been a very, very hard thing for us. Just because we know everybody loved him, and I know everybody wants to honor him. So we're hoping that everybody joins us on that finale for a great big Stars and Stripes Forever with everybody that wants to come and play gets
That'll
to
be
join.
incredible.
Yeah.
That'll be incredible. And please shake your heads no or something if you don't want to talk about this. When he got ill, do you mind telling us what happened? I'm getting some people want to know if you're comfortable. I should have asked you before we went on, but I didn't expect these emails.
He's been ill, really.
Okay.
Are you're comfortable?
Well,
Whatever you want to say, you know.
If first of all, I don't know how much Steve told you about me I am not the public person that my husband is.
Yes.
We are polar opposites, but he has 5,000 friends on Facebook, which is the maximum that you can have on one Facebook account. And he would periodically have to like go through and remove people that he didn't really know that well or hadn't whatever, so he could make room for more friends. And when he went in for his surgery, we went into the hospital on January 9th. I knew that I would have to communicate with everybody that loves him. So throughout his hospital stay, we did post on Facebook. So yes, we can talk about this. Yes, that's fair game. Steve, in 2005, had gone to New York with John Vineski for some convention. Now, I can't remember what it was. And he came back and he didn't feel well. And it lasted for months and months. And finally, in the summer, we found out he had an aortic aneurysm. And he was lucky that it hadn't burst, dissected. And he had open heart surgery in July of 2005 to replace his aortic valve and to repair this aortic aneurysm. At that time, he was diagnosed with Marfan syndrome, which affects connective tissues in the body. Some people call it the Abraham Lincoln disease because one of the characteristics is long bones. Now, Steve didn't have that characteristic. The only symptom that he had was in his aortic artery. And so for 15 years after that surgery, he felt fine. He recovered. He was great. We got through that.
They put in a replacement valve
Right.
that was taken from a cow's heart.
And he was
Full strength.
yeah, he did very, very well. And then in 2020, on his birthday, Brendan was finally giving his senior recital, due to COVID. University had to shut down, the world shut down. And finally, in July, Brendan had his recital. And at that time, Steve didn't feel well. He went ahead, he played drum set in a jazz trio with Brendan. After the concert, he said, I really don't feel well. I think you need to take me to the emergency room. So we went to the emergency room, and his descending aorta had actually dissected. And we went to Cleveland Clinic. He had endovascular surgery to repair the descending aorta. That surgery, believe it or not, was harder to recover from. And that is what, at the end of his time at YSU, he was on medical leave for a whole year because it took him a while to recover from that. And the doctors suggested that he go ahead and retire or work part-time. So he retired. We moved back to Illinois, where my family's from. He had a year where he was a very unhappy retired person.
Oh, you know best. I'm certain.
Yeah,
that-
yeah. And
he failed retirement. So that's what
He failed retirement.
yeah,
He did a
yeah.
bad job.
He was not happy. But throughout all of that, he still wasn't really feeling well. And I couldn't tell if it was just that he was retired and he didn't know what to do with himself. I couldn't tell if it was because we had moved and he was missing his colleagues and his friends. I couldn't tell if it was his health.
Probably a little bit of.
Yeah,
all three.
in retrospect, I'm sure it was all of the above. I encouraged him to look for work. I said, if you don't like being retired, then but for goodness sakes, don't be retired anymore. He applied for and interviewed for a few different jobs. He ended up at Indiana State, was happy as a clam, went in for a routine checkup every year annually. He had a 2D echo looking at all of the repairs that had been done and checking out the rest of his aorta, and it came back that we've got problems with the abdominal aorta. So the options were live with it, and when it goes, and the chances of survival are not great, or we can sign you up for this surgery, and there are significant risks, but if you make it through the surgery without all of these risks manifesting, then you can have some more time with us. And you know him, he went for it. He's like, sign me up. So that's a long answer to your question.
No, it's not. Please.
But that's what led up to the surgery. And a lot of people have said, it was open heart surgery. This was not open heart surgery. It was a very invasive surgery of the abdomen, from underneath the left shoulder, clear down to the groin, to repair, to replace the abdominal aorta from the diaphragm down into where it splits to feed the arteries of the legs. He had dissection occurring, which means the walls of the aorta were splitting apart. He had aneurysms, which means the walls of the arteries are bulging out and could burst. And while they successfully repaired that, it was too much for his body. His heart suffered.
I mean, the surgery was like 14 hours.
Yeah, it was
supposed to be 10 to 12 and
well, it was a 10 to 12 hour procedure. It actually took about 12 hours, but there were complications at the end. His heart, they thought they had his heart restarted, because throughout this process they have to disconnect your heart and your lungs, and so they filter your body through, or filter your blood through, an artificial means of life support. And when they hooked him all back up, they thought his heart was going, and it stopped. And so they put him on I can't remember the name
ECMO.
of the ECMO, our friend ECMO, to do the work of the heart and the lungs. And he was on that for 5 days, and intubated. They were able, his heart recovered enough that they were able to take him off ECMO. Meanwhile, his kidneys had completely shut down. He lost a lot of blood. It was just horribly invasive. To do the procedure, they have to tie off all of the arteries that come off of that main artery to his other organs. During the procedure, some of the arteries that feed the spinal cord were damaged, and he suffered paralysis that would not come back. It was just too much. It was just too much. And he's a fighter. He fought, and we got 3.5 weeks in, and he had told me before surgery, the two things he dreaded most were the chest tubes. They put drainage tubes in, and they're very uncomfortable. And he had been through that a couple of times before. So he knew to dread that. And he said the other thing was intubation, you know, the tube down the throat to breathe. He said, I hate that. He goes, that's the worst. And so there was a point where we're like, you know what, we know he wants that tube out. They lowered his sedation so that he could communicate with us. We did get to talk to him, and he agreed. He wanted the ventilation tube out. So we took that out, and he was struggling to breathe, and he did not wish for any additional medical intervention. He's like, either I breathe on my own or I don't. And all of us, the kids, Claudia and Brendan, got to speak with him. Matt, his oldest son that's down in Austin, we got him on video chat. We got to take some selfies that we will not post those, but we will cherish those. And so yeah, it was a hard month. So that's it. And you know, throughout his time in the hospital, we tried to keep everybody informed. But it's hard. It's hard to post. It's hard to post all of that. So,
and people need to respect. I understand concern. We're all concerned. We
sure.
need respect. For you to have to feel obligated to update people.
And people were very
kind of go over it. Yeah, I'm not, because I understand it.
Yeah, people were very understanding and very respectful. And for that, we are all grateful. And, you know, it's interesting because, you know, I lived with Steve for 32 years, knew him for 35 years. And I don't know how many times kids can vouch for this. We'd be driving from the 8 hours from Ohio back to Illinois to visit my family. How many times I would look over at him. I always did the driving. He's a terrible driver.
He was a bad driver.
I was like, if we're going to stay married, I'm driving, because if I don't drive, you will divorce me for what I say to you while you're driving.
One of the last things he did before he went into surgery was wreck his car last December.
Really? Wow.
But on these trips, I would look over at him and I would say, you are the worst company in the car, because his face was on his phone as his thumbs were flying. And I'm like, what are you doing on that phone? Now I know what he was doing. He was remaining in contact with every single student he ever had and every colleague. It was overwhelming, the outpouring of support that we received throughout his illness. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful. But even I had no idea what kind of relationships he maintained with so many people. Just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm going to ask what the Brits would call the bleeding obvious, but how does that's got to be, I don't want to guess. Let me ask, how does that feel for you?
It shows me a whole nother side to him that I didn't even know. And like, his capacity for loving was even greater than I realized. And what does that say about me? I guess I'm not that observant, I don't know, but it's just, it's like,
I'm going to get argumentative with you, Stephanie. Go ahead.
But, and then on the other hand, I'm like, well, no wonder I wanted him to throw that phone away, because, and no wonder he was tired a lot of the time, but he did expend a lot of energy, and for good reason. I mean, he had influence and helped so many people. So You know,
He was everyone's dad.
yeah.
I love how.
Well, and
everyone's-
a constant encourager. And that's something, and I'm going to end up getting teary.
It's okay.
That's something that there's a big hole now, because for me personally, I teach elementary music, and there are days when I'm like, you know, this is just impossible. You know, kids are kids, and he'd be like, Stephanie, you're great at what you do. They love you. He was a constant encourager, and we miss that. I mean, I miss it, but so do a lot of other people. And I don't know that anybody out there can do that the way that he did.
I will say nobody can do it the way even
Yeah.
Gage did it. Very unique with that. I just would say that you did observe the love. You may not have understood the breadth of it with others,
Yeah.
or not realize, I shouldn't say understood, not known of that, but you
Right.
do, you
Right.
all knew his loving heart.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's not like you weren't observant, because you bask in that. You know, you don't take, nobody takes love for, well, some people do take love for granted. I've got to watch, but you know, you were surrounded by, it was part of
Yeah.
your family. So, you know, that seemed, his level of, his capacity for love seemed normal. Correct. I mean, it's always great to hear from others, but of course, you know, after, it's like when a student would come up or somebody will say something, it's like, you love hearing it, certainly, but it would be, yeah, that's, you know, my husband, or that's my dad.
Yeah.
It's who he is, and the impact,
Yeah.
and the people you'll never hear from,
Right.
where he impacted. You know, I know a lot of people reach out, and I feel certain that there are so many others that just, you know,
At the funeral service, and that was also hard. You know, we're here in Illinois, and there were so many people back in Ohio, but people traveled from New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, all over, and it was wonderful to see everybody. But there were people that came through the receiving line that said to me, "You have no idea who I am. I never played under your husband's baton, but I watched him and I loved him and I had to come." So that, you're right. There are people out there that we will never interact with, that he touched. Yeah.
I mean,
go ahead.
I think too about, like, you know, how heartfelt everything has been from Indiana State, and he was only there for one semester.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, like to see everybody from Youngstown, you know, all those kids would have had him for anywhere from 4 to more years, you know, but all of the students and teachers at Indiana State, you know, the way they've reached out after just being with him for 4 months is like, wow.
For you, I've got to ask Claudia.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly hard to hear
Mm-hmm.
some of what you heard. And grief, I've done an awful lot of shows over the years on grief, with authors and others about grief. And one of my favorites is two authors from the UK that wrote a book called The Tsunami of Grief.
Mm.
Are you okay if I go here and talk a little bit about grief, or maybe would you rather all of you, would you rather or not? We'll move on. We'll move on.
Brenda,
Sorry.
you can,
That's okay.
we can. I don't know that we'll all be able to answer everything.
No,
but-
I'm not asking. Let me just share this. Even their title of Tsunami of Grief. It comes in waves. It can come in waves and come
Yeah,
up on
absolutely.
you. And I know people are well-intended when they say, I know how you feel. I know they're well-intended. So yet
Mhm.
you don't know how someone feels, or, my spouse, you just don't, everybody's different with that. And when people will say, time will make it better. Time doesn't make it better. It makes the loss, you may handle it differently,
Mhm.
but losing somebody that you love and cherish, time doesn't make it better or easier. It may make it different down the road, or you may react to the waves differently, but not better. And again, I'm saying this respectfully to people that make those statements. There's nothing you can say. We all want to say something that we feel is going to want to carry that pain for a little bit, and you can't. And now some of the, people just need to be there. Go ahead, Brendan.
Oh, no, I was just checking up on them over there, just making sure everyone's okay.
Yeah.
If you talk about grief, there are days when everything's good, and then strange times,
Yes.
you pull in the driveway and it's like, oh, it hits you, he's gone. And or we always had, I have Sirius XM on my car. I have a subscription, and we always had the 70s channel on in the car when we were together. And I've switched to Yacht Rock because it's hard to hear.
Switch to what?
Yacht Rock channel. Yacht as in a boat.
Yeah,
it's soft rock.
Okay. Sorry. I'm very old. I still use Pandora. I don't know. About Pandora. I heard you say Spotify earlier.
I've just, that's one of those things where it's, that's not anything I would have anticipated, but driving, I was like, oh, this is hard. So I changed radio stations to something different. And, they play some of the same music. It's just a little easier to deal with. And
there may be a time that you want to play the other.
That's right. That's right. Right. So, Waves of Grief, that's an excellent way to.
Tsunami of Grief. That's the book. I'm sorry. Waves.
Yes. That's an excellent way to describe it. And
you don't know when they're going to hit.
That's right. There's no anticipating. Well, we kind of, last night, Indiana State University Wind Ensemble or Wind Orchestra gave their performance, their spring concert, as a dedication to Steve. And they performed the piece that they commissioned from Julie Giroux in his honor. They performed the piece that Anthony O'Toole composed in his honor. They selected and performed some other pieces that Dr. Kathy Spangler had conversations with Steve about as a colleague, and it was a wonderful concert. The students gave a fantastic performance. She did an outstanding job with the group, and I walked into that expecting some grief. So there are times that you expect it, but what's interesting is that was a more joyful occasion for me. And yes, there was grief as part of it, but it was a different kind of grief. It was wonderful to see his connection with those students in such a short time, but yet it was very sad because he was so looking forward to being with them this semester, at the end of the semester, you know, talking to them, coming back and rehabbing and visiting with them, and then going back to work there in the fall. So yeah, it's a kind of a roller coaster ride.
Yeah, it's a good way to.
Yeah. I know for, if you don't mind, I've told this before on the show, but I know when I had a tumultuous relationship with my dad. I love him. I miss him. I've always said my mom and dad were a beautiful couple. He adored my mom. They were so loving. They shouldn't have had kids though. I'm serious. They're parenting. And regardless, when my dad died, I remember this was a couple of weeks after, and I was driving home from work. And I remember tears just started coming. And I don't know what I was thinking about, whatever. They just started coming. And not to belabor this, but I remember at the time thinking, what is wrong with me? It's been like 3 weeks already. And then I was talking to myself, and I thought, for better or for worse, that man was in my life for almost 39 years. How would I possibly think a couple of weeks later? I know it sounds dumb.
Yeah.
But I thought, and you just don't know.
Right.
Yeah. You just don't know. When you let's get off that. I hope you were okay that I went there.
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
Understanding. And so the concert, again, tell us the date, time and date, place of the concert. I've got it posted, folks. So Claudia, please.
Yeah, it's gonna be Sunday, May 21st at 3 p.m.
2:30.
Okay, at 3:30. Thank you. Well, hey, I was gonna have you there early. We're all gonna get
Come
really
early.
nice.
That's right. Come early.
3:30 p.m. at Stambaugh Auditorium in Youngstown, Ohio. Please bring your instruments and play Stars and Stripes with us. And please stick around afterwards for a reception with cookie tables.
It's not a Youngstown event without cookie tables.
True.
Yes.
Also worth note, the concert will be free, but there
Yeah.
will be
You have to.
tickets. It will be a ticketed event, even though it's free, just to make sure that there's room for
And
everyone.
tickets are available through the Stambaugh Auditorium box office. You can order them by phone or online at the Stambaugh Auditorium website. And they are limited to 4 tickets per person. But by all means, have everybody in your group get their 4 tickets and bring friends, because the more the merrier.
Again,
we want a full house.
I'm sure it'll be an overflowing house. Stambaugh.auditorium.com. That's Stambaugh.auditorium.com. Go to the office or call 330-259-9651. 330-259-9651. That's 330-259-9651. It'll be a wonderful opportunity. I'm getting emails from people that I didn't know that hadn't been on, that are telling me about your husband or your dad and the influence. And it's just incredible how many lives he's touched.
Yeah.
But different is it, like you say, everybody's dad. When you said that, it's like to hear these people say it, and I know we talked about it before, to hear that, and again, the people that you won't hear from, he's still dad and husband to you, but it feels good to know how much love he had, and encouragement, and of course teaching for so many. I'd like if you would all share. I know we've gone a long time, so I hope you're cool with it. I'll wrap up. I could talk about it. Let me tell you, I just thought I should look and see what text messages I have from him. I had one, and I saw one, and I'm going to look at the emails that I remember I sent him and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I'm going to look up the email afterwards. I sent him it was like a quasi classical music, jazz, whatever. And I was very excited when I heard it, because I loved it and I appreciate classical music. It's not the genre that I listen to. And I say that respect, if everybody liked the same kind of music, how boring. I always say that about like spices and foods. If everybody liked the same thing, if there was only one style of music, they'd be
Right.
awful. I think. But I sent him one. I was very excited. And of course he responded in a very positive way.
Yeah.
I don't think he liked it though. Maybe. But share something else with you, and then I'll wrap up. How about Claudia or Brendan? You want to start? Something else you want us to know, or a memory of? Yeah.
You just said something about wanting to look through old text messages or emails, and that jogged my memory. I would get sometimes just, it's been a few years since I've lived at home. I was out, I worked for a little bit. I went back to grad school. I just graduated in December and am working for the university that I just graduated from. But
it's wonderful.
As I'm out living wherever I'm living, I would just sometimes spontaneously get these texts in the middle of the day that was just love you in all caps with 2 hearts. Or I would just get a random phone call that was just like, I'm in my car, I'm driving somewhere, I miss you. And I did the same thing. I also hate driving. I hate driving in general, and I hate driving by myself with no one to talk to. So if I ever had a long drive, I would also just like spontaneously call my dad and we would just like talk and chat.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Brendan, you're up.
Okay. One of the he always said 2 things to us as kids every single day. It was do your best and I love you.
Yeah.
And that's something that getting into adulthood, I have realized I should not take for granted, because that kind of security and encouragement every single day, it's not something that everybody has, and it makes all the world of difference, and that's something I would say to anybody, anybody who's not just a parent, but also an encourager in some kind of like teaching position like that. I think it really makes a difference. And one of the very last things he said to me, when we were with him toward the end there, was he said, don't stagnate. And I think that kind of goes with that, always do your best. He was such a believer in the fact, like in the principle of reaching your own fullest potential. And that doesn't mean that you have to be like number 1 in the whole entire world at whatever it is you're trying to do, but that every person should reach their own full potential, like that. And like I said, I've come to realize, getting into my adulthood, that's not the foundation that everybody has, and it's made all the world of difference for me, feeling like I had that support system to push myself to do that. And for anyone that knew him, just to remember that that's what he wanted from everybody.
And you carry that on. That in your heart. I agree with you. People assume, or they don't say it, or they don't express it. And again, just briefly about my dad, I remember, and he was, oh boy, he's been gone for over 30 years, I remember speaking with my wife and about my dad had never said he loved me. And again, I know I knew it, and I just never heard it. And I remember my wife saying, that's important to you. She said, you should ask him. And the thought of asking my dad that, do you love, it was just like, no way, no way. And I remember we had gone over my parents' house for one Sunday morning for breakfast. And I said, Dad, do you love me? And he was what kind of question is that? Where do you come up with this stuff? And he kind of he went on, he didn't like yell but he was just like, where does that come from? He looked at my mom and said, where does he get this stuff? Okay. So I let it go. That worked well. And, not, of course. And then I can't remember how many weeks later it was that we were over my mom and dad's, and I can't remember what it was, but he said, because I love you, that's why. And of course I started to cry. My wife started to cry, and my mom started to cry. And then of course he went into that, what's everybody, what's going on here? But I heard it. And that's different. Again, for you to hear it all the time, every day. And that's just not the case with everybody. And we've got to tell the people, and be they friends, be they, family, that we love them. We need to express it. I understand the thought of, well, I know it and I feel it. You need to say it, right? Because think about that with the three of you. It's beautiful when you said that about your dad, and both of you saying that about your dad and his encouragement. Stephanie, anything else you want to share with us? Because I could go on for hours.
Steve was my hero. He lived what he believed. His faith, his passion for music, his love for family and students. He lived it every day. And he even facing the surgery and the insurmountable recovery and possibly not coming out of it, he was my hero. He gave it his best shot. He loved us through everything, and he's my hero.
What an incredible legacy. I've got to tell you that I just got an email that someone said I popped in on the show and I was listening and I didn't know him. I did, yet what did he say exactly? Well, he's just expressing what an amazing guy. I'm not going to read it now, but it's just what an amazing guy. Just hearing about him, so it's beautiful. All the lives touch. And Brenda, I just want to say in closing that I'll never forget when your dad brought you in studio to do the gig with me, and leading up, he's just always so proud, and he always loved expressing that. And I can remember him sitting across from me and you in the other chair, and him beaming, looking at you, just beaming. And it's beautiful. What a beautiful human, Dr. Stephen Gage. And I've got the links up, and I will continue. I keep the links up for the wonderful event that's happening on the 21st of May at 3:30 at Stambaugh Auditorium. And get your tickets now, because they're free. I was to say a sellout. It's going to be certainly. So I don't know the status of the tickets, but I'm sorry, Brendan.
We hope so. We want a full house.
I know so. I know so. I know so. Thank you so much for sharing so much today.
Well, thank you. thank you for having us.
It's
We've
my honor.
really loved talking with you.
Yes.
You know, what are you going to say after we're off? Oh my God, that guy kept going on and on. And I can't believe he said this now. Thank you. I'm truly, truly an honor. Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Claudia, Brendan, and Stephanie. I'll make a couple of comments. Thanks. Right after this. And folks, what an incredible man, Stephen